everybody. My name is María Gaztambide. I'm the Executive Director of the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico. I wish to give you a very warm welcome, and especially give you, Willem, a very warm welcome.
Thanks very much, Maria.
Our museum and to Puerto Rico.
Buenas noches.
So welcome everybody to this edition of Director's Talks, which is a new series of programs that I introduced last year to bring to Puerto Rico thought makers from the international art world. As you know, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary, and we've been, for this past year, we have been thinking both about our trajectory and past, but also thinking about where we should go in the future. And so I've been inviting some of my friends and colleagues and other people that I did not know, like you, but who are helping us think that through as we move forward as an institution and as a nation. I am delighted to introduce Willem van Gogh. He is the great-grandson of Theo van Gogh, brother of the famed Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. You were originally a lawyer, but after a very successful career as a lawyer, you joined the Van Gogh Museum, and you've had a number of roles in that institution for the longest period of time as advisor to the museum and the board, specifically helping the institution bring forth and establish partnerships and greater visibility for the institution. That's so we're so happy that you accepted our invitation to come to San Juan and join us for this night. So thank you so much.
I'm very happy being here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Tonight we're going to be thinking and talking through some issues that have to do with an artist's legacy, estates, and also on a more personal side, what it meant to live under the shadow of Vincent van Gogh and also grow up surrounded by his work, which I'm sure that you get all of these questions all the time. So walk us through your family. This is Vincent van Gogh, an early picture of him and a portrait that we've known, but there's so many other lesser known characters in this incredible story that you're going to share with us tonight.
So Vincent couldn't find his way in life, and he had many jobs, and at the age of 27, his brother Theo, with whom he had a very close and intimate relationship, said, "Why don't you become an artist?" And that's what Vincent did at the age of 27, and he died at the age of 37. And he started from scratch, and after 5 years practicing, he thought he was professional enough to present himself to the world as an artist. And as his, let's say, graduation work, his promotion work, he made the potato eaters. And so the second 5 years of his career, the last 5 years of his career, he made more than 1,000 paintings.
Oh my gosh.
And also 1,100 drawings. And the last 70 days of his life, he made 72 paintings.
Oh my gosh.
So
more
incredible.
Than one per day.
More than one per day, and also 25 drawings. He was obsessed by becoming better and better to improve his skills and everything. And his brother Theo, who was an art dealer in Paris, he supported him. And he sent him money every month, enough money to buy everything he needed to be an artist and also to live and for food. So there's some myth that Vincent was a very poor man, but he wasn't. He could do everything he wanted. So in return to Theo's support, Vincent sent half of his oeuvre, so to be exact, 456 paintings, to his brother. He said, "They're yours." And Vincent sold only one painting in his life.
One painting?
One painting.
Out of more than 1,000 from your calculations, yeah.
The people didn't understand what he was doing. His peers, his co-artists, they did. The day of the funeral, they said, "One of the greatest of our generation has passed away." They understood his significance. So when Vincent died, Theo and his wife, Joanna, and their 1-year-old baby, who is my grandfather,
Whom you're looking at now, right?
Yeah, the baby and Joanna. They had like 500 paintings in the apartment, all the drawings, and also a collection of their contemporaries collected by the two brothers. But unfortunately, 7 months after Vincent's death, Theo passed away as well. So Joanna, the 28-year-old widow with a 1-year-old son, became the owner of the collection of everything that was in the apartment in Montmartre in Paris. Joanna turned out to be a very, very competitive, intelligent woman because she agreed with Theo that Vincent was an important artist. And she dedicated her life to promoting Vincent's art, and she did so in a way of marketing before the word marketing existed, I think. She set up exhibitions of her collection. She started in the Netherlands, then in Belgium, then in Germany, the UK. They also traveled to the United States. And she sold iconic works of the collection to art collectors and art dealers. And that's how Vincent's fame, thanks to her, mushroomed very rapidly.
She also had a very good idea about how important it was to preserve his thoughts. And so I understand that your family, through Joe, also was in the possession of a number of important letters that were later published through her effort as well. So that in itself was also very visionary.
It certainly is. And she started reading Vincent's letters to his brother. We still have 920 letters from Vincent to his brother. And from Theo to Vincent, we have about 20 because Vincent didn't keep them. And she started reading the letters out of nostalgia reason, to feel as if she were in the world of the two brothers. She missed so much. And she noticed that they were of huge importance for art history. Firstly, they were very well written, it's literature level. And she noticed there is no artist we know so much of as Vincent van Gogh, because he already started writing his letters to his brother before he became an artist at age 27. And the last letter dates 5 days before his death. And he writes about everything to the most intimate person in his life, his brother Theo. And as a Canadian art professor said, Vincent's letters are a document without parallel in art history.
Yes, I was going to say that as well for us art historians as we work through projects and research, especially when the artist is no longer with us, to have fragments of his or her own voice is just, the importance is incalculable. So that was incredible, and also incredible foresight that Joe would have thought to really actively look for ways to share this knowledge and this body of work with the world, actually. And I think that the letters have been translated into multiple languages, reprinted multiple times. It's just incredible. One of the other things that happened through Jo's industrious nature was that she was able to secure important exhibitions of Vincent's work. Here we're showing you a few examples, including the one on the left. I don't know if you want to mention a little bit of that 1905 exhibition.
Well, it was the biggest exhibition ever, merely from her collection, and that was the first huge introduction in the Netherlands. And the Stedelijk Museum Amsterdam is our MoMA, our Museum of Modern Art. So Vincent, from that moment on, started becoming the most important modern artist.
And that affiliation with the museum, which started more or less around the time of this exhibition, proved to be very valuable as well, because during times of war, your family brokered a collaboration with the museum where the museum kept the work. And through that relationship, much of the work that was in your family's hands survived because of the museum, because they had a bunker and kept the work as well.
Well, in 1924, Joanna sold one version of the Sunflowers to the National Gallery in London. And they insisted on acquiring the most iconic work by Vincent van Gogh, and she sold it to the National Gallery in London. And then she said to her son, my grandfather, since Vincent is now hanging with the sunflowers in the National Gallery in London, he is so famous worldwide, we're going to stop selling and promoting his art. And we keep everything in the collection we still have. And she kept the most iconic works for the family. So another version of the sunflowers, the yellow house painting, the bedrooms, a series of self-portraits by Vincent. And 1 year later, in 1925, she passed away, and my grandfather became the owner of the entire collection. 200 paintings by Vincent van Gogh, among them the famous one I already mentioned. And indeed, he had an agreement with our MoMA, the Stedelijk Museum, that they had half of his collection on display in the museum, and it rotated. But the big concerns on the World War II, Goering, the Minister of Propaganda, he said that Vincent's art and a lot of modern art was anti-art and bad for the people. So the director and the head curator of the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, they got the whole collection hidden in the bunkers in the dunes at the North Sea in the Netherlands. And so it survived the war.
They survived without being branded degenerate art by the Nazis, essentially. We wouldn't know the extent of his work had it not been for that.
A very interesting detail is Goering was officially his policy was that he was against modern art, and secretly he collected Vincent's paintings. My grandfather.
Your grandfather, exactly. And do you want to mention something about the family tradition of naming?
So Theo gave his son the names of his beloved brother, Vincent, but Vincent had two names, Vincent Willem. So grandfather is called Vincent Willem, and he was also famous because he was the owner of the famous Van Gogh collection. So it was very confusing, and in the art world, people called him the engineer. He was a consulting engineer. They called him an engineer, and some called him Vincent, like the artist. And I'm the eldest grandchild of grandfather, and according to Dutch tradition back in the days, I'm from 1953, I have the same names as grandfather, Vincent Willem. But my parents said, we already have two famous Vincents in the family, so we let you go by your second name, Willem. And I'm very happy with that, because imagine that I introduce myself.
Yes.
I'm Vincent van Gogh. Then you think, and the next thing he says is going to say is that he's married to Frida Kahlo.
But your grandfather also, like his mother, had a deep understanding of the immense importance of this collection. And so he also, like his mother, did not rest until he was able to really realize his lifelong vision of establishing a museum dedicated to Vincent.
So his dream was to, firstly, to keep the collection together, and secondly, to share his collection with the whole world. And he had 3 children, so he needed to arrange something, because if not, after his death, the collection would be divided in 3 parts. And his children needed to pay 25% inheritance tax. So keeping the collection together would disperse after his death. And the Dutch government, they knew of his concerns, and they negotiated with grandfather, and they got to a very clear agreement, the 1962 agreement, saying that grandfather would transfer the whole collection, all the paintings, he owned 200 paintings, 600 drawings, everything, the contemporaries, the letters, the subject Vincent painting. I like to say everything ever touched by Vincent or Theo, everything, to a foundation to guarantee that it would be kept together, because a foundation can last forever. And so there's nothing in the family anymore, nothing, not a drawing or a sketch by Vincent, nothing. And in return, the state of the Netherlands said, if you do so, we build a museum for the collection, the Vincent van Gogh Museum, as it was called back in the days, and run the museum. And the agreement dates 1962, and the museum opened in 1973.
Yes, and we're going to see some images, but I wanted to, when we were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned something about you having a favorite drawing that when all of this was happening, you asked your grandfather emphatically to let you keep it, or something like that, right?
Well, when he had the agreement in 1962, I was 9 or 10 years, and my grandfather was very educational, and he explained me everything. And I understood, and I said, well, I understand what you agreed with the Dutch authorities, but I like the sketches in the letters so much. And did I know the value or the importance of a letter, a 9-year-old boy? And I said, why can't you give me the letter with the sketch of the soul, my favorite painting when I grew up? And I said, I'll keep it under a stash of towels in my boys' room. And I thought it also was a good idea for my cousins, that they could choose one of the drawings, one of the sketches. And he said, if I do so, what is going to happen with that sketch? If you get children and you pass away, they need to sell it, they need to cut it in 2 or 3 pieces, and so that's contrary to the dream, the ideal of keeping it together. And I remember very well that I understood what he was saying, but I was not happy with the answer.
So here, like you mentioned, the museum opened in 1973, and we have a number of images that we wanted to share with you. 2 images that we're looking at, the building under construction, and I would assume that the one on the left is before, when your grandfather has already planted the seed that this institution is taking physical form.
Yeah, to show what they were doing, they hang a poster of the sunflowers.
And then it opens.
The whole family attended the opening, and my youngest niece, she gave the flowers to our queen, Queen Juliana. Grandfather and the queen, they opened together the museum. And I was 19. And half a year before the opening, I had the feeling, all the paintings my grandfather was surrounded by in his home, they are moved to the museum. And how solitary, and what a pity for him that nothing is left in his home anymore. And he had always said there's a painting dedicated to his birth called the Almond Blossom painting, and he wrote in his diaries, my own little painting was always with me, but now it went to the museum. So I thought I need to have a good conversation, 19 years, with grandfather about how do you feel about it. But I didn't have the opportunity before the opening of the museum. And after the opening ceremony, I went looking for grandfather in the galleries to congratulate him. And I saw him explaining to our queen, so we painted the walls green, that's better for the vivid colors of Vincent's paintings. And here we see the works he made in the south of France. And I noticed that I didn't have to have any conversation with him because I saw his dream had become true. He was the founder of the consultancy firms like KPMG, EU. And so he exactly knew what he was doing. And preparing the building of the museum, he loved the United States. He had worked in the United States, and he admired the technological progress and everything, the arts in the United States. So before giving all the standards and the instructions to the architect, he visited many recently built museums in the United States, and he learned a lot from that. And so that's how we got very closely involved with the construction.
And on the right is an image which we find very dear of him at the front desk of the museum greeting people 3 years after it had been built.
After the opening, he had his office in the museum, and he always had lunch with the guards in the galleries. He said, the guards, they know what is going on in the museum. And it's true.
And here is the building, 1973. The museum was comprised initially of your family's body of work, but then there were also significant acquisitions, including this collection, which placed Van Gogh's works in the context of what his contemporaries had been creating more or less at the same time.
In context, and also to show Vincent's inspiration. And what we see here is a very, very beautiful pastel by Degas in pristine condition. Very special, the composition, the head cut off, and depicting her from this angle. I think that one, the Degas, we acquired 5 years ago. And the Henri Matisse, we know that he dedicated this to Vincent. We acquired this 1 year ago.
When you say we, was that the foundation, the museum?
The museum.
Okay.
And the portrait of Auerbach by Edward Munch. And Edward Munch and Vincent, they more or less had this parallel in their career. Both had mental issues, but also they work with large colored areas. So that's also very important for the context.
And now today, the museum does a number of things, and as we can see down below how it looks today, it's since grown, but your institution still devotes quite a bit of their time showing us or presenting contemporary readings or rereadings of Van Gogh's work. But I think, which is really interesting to me at least, there's this entire series of exhibitions of contemporary artists who are in dialogue or in some way inspired or shared affinities with Van Gogh. And I think that that keeps the collection alive.
It does, and it's also important for art history, and it's also very interesting for next generations. So we had this exhibition. It's about having the same concept, the same approach, the same inspirations, the same, thoughts about society and life. We had a huge Ansel Kiefer show. We saw many one-to-one works because he made so many. On sunflowers and the wheat fields. It was a very spectacular show. 3 days after the opening, he celebrated his 80th birthday. And he liked drawing very much when he was in high school. And there was this competition, and he won the competition, and it was an amount of money. And he used it to do a pilgrimage to the south of France in Vincent's footsteps, already at the age of 17. And ever since, he was connected and inspired by Vincent.
So this is probably a dream come true for him, to show at the museum alongside Van Gogh's works. Wow.
So we are planning more, of course. This works out very well. It's absolutely one of the main policies of our current director, who is Emmeline Gordenker. We have a show opening within 2 weeks on the color yellow in Vincent's days, but half of the exhibition wing is designed by Olafur Eliasson, a very contemporary artist who has made 2 or 3 installations. And I personally look very much forward to an exhibition we have in some years on Joan Mitchell, not Joni Mitchell, but Joan Mitchell. Deeply inspired by Vincent, and I love her work, like abstract work.
Terrific painter.
Yes, she is. And,
So we've talked quite a bit in preparing for our talk today about the enduring popularity of Vincent van Gogh, which has translated into many different types of manifestations, including all of these immersive experiences that we have seen all over the world. And as I understand it, there was one here in Puerto Rico not that long ago, maybe a few years ago. But it seems like global public are captivated by his work. And again, we wanted to show some of the things that we found in the process of just establishing how important Vincent van Gogh has been for our collective imagination. And these are some of the ways in which people have really gone wild with the influence. But why do you think his work is so enduring, you personally?
I think Vincent's art is everyday life. So he depicted his very simple bedroom, and hopefully we all have a place to sleep. It's the most private place you have, so it reflects his tiny yellow rented house the chair of his friend Paul Gauguin. It's about everyday life. Also, Vincent found consolation in nature, and I think we all do. When you don't feel well and you think, well, this Sunday afternoon I'm going to walk through a park and find some peace. And I think also his work is the cycle of life. If we see the painting of the sunflowers, it's about opening sunflowers, it's about flowering, and it's about fainting sunflowers. So that has all. And he painted the sower, he painted the harvest, he painted the reaper, also on the circle of life. Not everyone has everything clear in mind, but apparently, but not true, very simple images, but also the very strong, vivid colors make it very accessible for many people all over the world. And I think on different levels, both everyday life as on a more metaphorical level, it's about life of you and me, of all of us. And I think that's what makes his work so much beloved. And also we know so much about him thanks to his letters. And people recognize themselves in his struggles, his ups and downs, and also his message is that if you know what you want, he was obsessed by the art, he was obsessed by improving his skills, becoming a better, more professional artist. If you know what you want, you can get there. And I think that also appeals to so many people and also to so many young people all over the world.
And just to be so determined about not giving up on that dream, to your point, even when he had no public recognition in his life about what his contribution to art history was, he kept going, irrespective of what everybody else said, or didn't say in his case.
Most definitely.
I wanted to share with those of you who are joining us for the first time here at the museum, this is work by Arnaldo Roches Rabel, a Puerto Rican painter. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, he too was compelled to paint like Vincent and was inspired by his work. And he did an entire series using his own themes, but very much revolving around some of the same issues that we've discussed about Vincent too. And for those of you who would like to see it, it's on display here in our museum. It's really wonderful and compelling work.
It's very impressive.
So we would like to open this up for questions. I believe there's a question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm an art historian, and listening to this conversation about the idea of legacy and future, and knowing how Vincent thought about this responsibility he carried towards future generations, in a sense, I was thinking how this idea of technology and social media being implemented so much in the artwork of Van Gogh, we've seen it through interactive exhibitions and social media, how has it helped cement such a legacy, or what conversations do you think are possible to find newer ways to create legacy within a more technological generation?
Well, that's a very specific question. Well, some people, they say the life of the museum is more outside the museum than inside, because, well, we have, I think, 7 million followers on social media. And also, you showed the immersive shows, which take place all over the world. I think there are hundreds of them. And we are not involved in those shows. The intellectual property rights are expired, so they can do whatever they want. But I think that's also a very good way for many people not able to visit our museum or to visit the museum with many Van Gogh paintings like Musée d'Orsay in Paris or Metropolitan in New York. And it's a very accessible way to enjoy Vincent's art. And, well, I think coming up it will be innovated a lot, but that's not my expertise.
Si puede hacer algunos comentarios sobre el triste final.
Well, we do not exactly know what he suffered from. We had a seminar a few years ago with a psychoanalyst, art historians, psychiatrists, neurologists, all the experts, and well, they say we cannot say a diagnosis, because for a diagnosis you need to see the patient. But the conclusion was that they think he suffered a bipolar disorder, and also he had drank too much alcohol in the years in Paris. Absinthe, absinthe they bought on the street and was of horrible, terrible quality, and it damaged your brains. And the last months of his life, he had his ups and downs, and he came from the south of France to the north, was Theo's idea that he would work in Auvers-sur-Oise, where Dr. Gachet lived, and he could keep an eye on him. And traveling to Auvers-sur-Oise, he made a stopover Vincent made a stopover in Paris, and he met the young family for the first time. He hadn't met his sister-in-law yet, and he saw his nephew also for the first time. Then he worked in Auvers-sur-Oise, and Theo sent him a letter writing that he was an art dealer in Paris, Theo. And he was not the owner, and he was thinking about starting a firm for himself. And what do you need if you start a startup? You need money. So we think that Vincent was very much worried because he had noticed, and also for the future, that Theo had not only Vincent to take care of, but he was also responsible for his family, and he was thinking about starting a company for himself. And we think that maybe together with a huge depression was a reason
Might
to
have influenced
end
that.
his work.
I had one question, because I know that there might be some in the audience who are also or have been fortunate to live with art, because maybe your father, mother, grandfather, grandmother also created art, and you might have a legacy to take care of. What advice would you give other people who have been in your family's situation about the best questions to ask or the best ways to preserve an artist?
Well, for us, growing up as a descendant of Van Gogh, is growing up in our predecessors' dreams. And it's very hard for many people. It's not for us. But many collectors, they are very passionate, and turns out that also in many cases, their children are not that interested have the same passion. And I think the best way to conserve your collection is establishing a foundation in your lifetime. And you can make your children members of the board according to the articles, or other people if they are not interested. But if you want to keep it together, that's the best way to keep it together.
Willem, good afternoon. Thank you for visiting Puerto Rico. We're very appreciative. I hope you have a great time in the island and come visit us again. My question is, do you paint?
I do not paint, and I once did, and I never wanted to. I was very reluctant, but once with a circle of our closest friends of our museum, there was this painting class in Auvers-sur-Oise in the countryside, and I thought, well, let me step over my own shadow, and I'll join them. And so I made 3 paintings, and I wasn't disappointed. And
you have a high bar, too.
But when I came home, I happily showed them to my wife, and she said, "What are we going to do with these?" So she sent them to the basement.
Where they've lived happily ever after.
So it was very demotivating, but I'm afraid you cannot compete with an artist called Vincent van Gogh. So happily I don't.
How do you feel about the way they depict Vincent's life in movies, books, or pop culture? Do you think they get him right?
Well, Vincent is his own person, and he is also an icon. And Vincent van Gogh is everyone's Vincent van Gogh. And I think everyone can do with the inspiration or whatever they want. And I think there are some good movies. Kurosawa, the Japanese, made a nice movie. Was a nice by Robert Altman about the two brothers. This one with Willem, my name, Willem Dafoe. I think he looked very much like I imagined that Vincent was, but what do I know? And
It's actually very fascinating because you just said it. He is your Vincent van Gogh, but he is also our Vincent van Gogh, and it's so interesting how he lives on parallel planes.
I'm just really curious to hear more about some of your responsibilities as an assessor to the collection and the family legacy.
well, I'm not so much involved in the exhibition policy of the museum. We have two entities. The Vincent van Gogh Foundation is the owner of the collection. It's governed by 3 family members and a representative of the Minister of Culture. And the museum is run by the Van Gogh Museum Foundation. So that's the other entity. And the board of that museum, so the general director and the managing director, they decide about that. And they also, in close collaboration with the curators, of course, set out the exhibition policy. And I'm not so much involved with that. And what I do is, like tonight, I like to carry on the stories, the heritage of the two brothers, the history of, and the importance of Joanna, my grandfather, because, well, thanks to Theo, there's an artist called Vincent van Gogh. And thanks to Joanna, we have the letters. And there's a collection of 200 paintings. Well, we need to realize that, in my opinion, there's not a collection so big with so many iconic works of such an important artist together. I think Vincent is one of the most important artists ever. And that's thanks to Joanna.
Who saw the value, because this has happened, but probably happens today as well. There might be families holding on to the works of an artist who has not been established or recognized in life, and they might not think that those works have value other than maybe sentimental value, but I think your family was exceptional in that way, that recognized that this was work that needed to be known and shown and shared with people beyond the family nucleus.
And she was really a visionary woman to decide that on a certain moment she could keep her collection together, and that was of importance for everyone. It's cultural heritage of mankind. And thanks to grandfather, the collection is in a museum. Yeah. So that's my role.
Which artists did he admire?
He admired very many artists, and he started in the Netherlands in the Dutch tradition. The Hague School, dark green, dark brown, like the Potato Eaters painting. And after making the Potato Eaters painting, he moved to Paris, where his brother lived. And as an art dealer, his brother represented the avant-garde back in the days. And they lived in Montmartre, and everything was happening in 1 square kilometer in Montmartre. The galleries, the studios, nightlife, the restaurants, everything. And thanks to Theo, Vincent was introduced to Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, who lived around the corner. And he worked together with Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, and from him he learned to work with diluted oil paint, which gives a pastelish texture. And they became very, very good friends, and they admired each other, they inspired each other, they loved each other, they had a very good friendship. He met probably his best friend, Emile Bernard, at the age of 17. He was an artist already. Vincent was 33. And he worked with Émile Bernard. He worked with Paul Gauguin. He worked with the founders of pointillism, with Seurat and Signac, and they were very, very good friends, and he loved them. One of his heroes was Rembrandt, because with only one dot on the canvas, he made a pearl in the shiny eye, and also because of Rembrandt's clair-obscur, light and dark.
Has there ever been made an effort, whether it was post-World War II and the Nazi era, and more recently after the establishment of the foundation, in order to locate the other 500 paintings that were not donated to the family?
Very interesting question. Young artists, starting artists, and also already established artists, they exchange their works because they trade, because they are interested in each other's work. And the young artists, starting artists, have no money. And so what happened in this case was Vincent and Paul Gauguin met each other at an exhibition in Paris. And Paul Gauguin said to Vincent, I like the two sunflower paintings, not the famous we know, but, other fainted sunflower paintings. I like those sunflower paintings so much. And Vincent said, well, you can have them if I can have your women under a mango tree in Martinique. So that's how it works. And that's a part of the 500. And he gave many paintings away to his family, not only to Theo, to thank him for his support, but also to his sisters, to his mother, and to many friends, and the owners of the night cafe, the yellow house where he lived in Arles, next to the night cafe. They were very close friends and gave them his paintings. He paid his hotel bill with paintings.
But of course, there is a catalogue raisonné of his work, so many of those works that were not in your immediate family, that were not in the possession of your immediate family, have been identified and inventoried in the catalogue raisonné, right?
We know where they are. Maybe there are 2 or 3 missing. One of the most famous one we do not know where it is one of the 2 portraits of Dr. Gachet.
Which, as you know, was the doctor of most of the Impressionists and amassed an incredible collection of artworks because the artist would pay him, much like today or not that long ago, people would pay doctors with, I don't know, in our case, maybe chickens or hens or eggs, but the artist paid him with works, and he got to own an incredible collection of Impressionist works.
Hi, I'm the assistant painting conservator here in Museo de Puerto Rico, and my question is in regards to the impact Vincent's work has had on art conservation. If you could share with us any small glimpse of knowledge you might have in anything related to art conservation with Vincent's work or encompassing it?
Conserving Vincent's art is a huge concern because the colors are fading. And I liked the Iris's painting very much because of the combination of blue and green and yellow. But originally the blue was purple. And so the red had faded away. And so we have a triptych of blossoming trees, and I used to like the one in the middle, the white blossoms, and I mainly don't read the entries, the explanations. And I thought, well, when was it painted exactly? And I read it was the pink blossoming tree. So also the red had faded. So that's a huge concern. And the most important Dutch company is called ASML. And ASML is they make the machines to make chips. Very, very clever people work at that company. And they support our museum, and we had a visit. We talked about the problems we have and that we are working on it to stop it and that it will fade out. Because in 50 years, many paintings, you cannot see what was the image anymore. Mm-hmm. And we did a lot of research by art historians, people who know everything about paint, and also with paint companies and everything. And they said, well, we work with light, and why don't we start a task force? And now they are helping us, a group of 12 of those engineers, to think about what we can do and what would be hopefully a solution.
Hello, my name is Andrea Torres Maldonado. Thank you so much for being here with us in Puerto Rico, Willem, and for this incredible experience. I wanted to ask, what have you learned of the importance of preserving art and history, being so close to the works of Vincent and his letters? A follow-up question is, reading the letters and knowing his relationship with life and other people around him, how important is mental health, in your opinion? What role does it play in the life of an artist, in their creative process?
I do not really have an answer to the last part of your question, what mental health means in the life of an artist. There are so many variations, and I think nowadays, of course, Vincent had his ups and downs. We know, thanks to his letters, we know thanks to the stories on Vincent, his friends, they wrote about him, Emile Bernard wrote about him, Gauguin wrote about him, and it was considered like a kind of a taboo. It used to be a taboo, and we didn't pay attention to the mental issues of Vincent in the museum. We said, well, the works, they speak for themselves, and but the last decades, we all realized that we all have our mental issues, and it's part of life for everyone. Small mental issues or very heavy mental issues, and nowadays we pay attention to it. We write about it, and our conservators are scholars, of course, and we have this mental health program, also for schools, for younger people. We have the yoga session, mindfulness, enjoying Vincent's work in a very slow way to, well, also as to help and also as a consolation.
Yeah, as a culture, globally, we're all much more aware about these issues. And I think I would venture to say that probably all museums nowadays have wellness programs exactly for that reason.
As someone who's from a very young age been very inspired, very influenced by Van Gogh's work, especially had a deep connection with a lot of the imagery, the meaning, especially on the mental health side of the interpretation of his art. I'm very curious more as to how the whole process of being involved with a lot of this preservation work and the foundation has sort of, I wouldn't say warped, but changed or just given you a new light into how you view Van Gogh's work as more as someone who's never had the opportunity to see one in person, but has just been in awe of the mystique of his work in a way.
The last sentence has been the last thing you said?
Just as someone who's been always like in awe of the sort of mystique of seeing his work.
The mystique, yeah.
To whom? The mystique to whom?
He's talking from the perspective of someone who has not seen Vincent van Gogh's work, and we as outsiders have kind of always, many of us have viewed it in awe, but you've been on the inside. Is that a little bit what you were asking? How has having this experience shaped your? How has your role with the foundation and with the museum, has that changed how you view his work?
Yeah. Well, so I was born Vincent Willem van Gogh. And
hard to carry that.
And I was called Willem, but when I matriculated for a sports club or for a school, they said, "Hey, Vincent van Gogh." I said, "Well, they call me Willem." And so intuitively, I kept distance to Vincent's life and who he was. I liked his work very much. I enjoyed it, but I never wanted to become a Van Gogh expert. Mm-hmm. And until I started working for the museum when I was 45, I never had read articles in catalogs. I enjoyed looking at the paintings and also modern art and contemporary art. And well, nowadays, I was a lawyer before. I wanted to find my own way. And when I was 45, the museum asked me to work for the museum. And at that age, I felt that I was open to take my responsibility for the heritage of the two brothers. And ever since, I do read some works and some articles or books on Vincent, or more on the history than the person himself. But I think I learned to know him a little bit better. But to me, he also is a very, very, very complicated person.
Good afternoon, my name is Luis Bonilla. I am a history and art history dual major, and I wanted to ask you a follow-up question regarding how best to preserve an artist's legacy. As you mentioned before, the best way to go about it is to establish a foundation, but if that's hard to accomplish due to lack of funds or public interest, how would you go about growing their legacy to reach that goal? Do you recommend selling to grow? Or is it better to work through loaning their work to galleries and museums as to keep the collection together? Which route would you take to preserve that legacy and generate interest in their story?
If you're not able to, maybe don't have the means to establish a foundation to take care of an artist's legacy, what other alternatives would you suggest? And you mentioned a few examples, right?
Well, I think a very good way to contribute to preserving the artist's legacy is writing about the artist and studying about the development of the artist and what he wanted to realize.
You have lived with kind of like the omnipresent knowledge of this incredible artist, but you've never met him, obviously. If he was alive today, what question would you have for Vincent? What would you ask him?
That's a good one.
Well, I think I know the answer, but I would ask him, are you going on that way? So, obsessed by innovating the arts. And I think he would agree that he would.
I don't know if there is another question in the room.
How do you personally feel about the social weight of being a Van Gogh? Are there any more Van Goghs to continue the legacy?
After your generation.
Yes, the next generation. And so, as I already said, the foundation is governed by 3 family members and always a representative of the branches of the 3 children of grandfather. And we do a lot to get the next generations involved. So that they take their own responsibility when we step down. And one of my generation did step down, so was followed by one of the next generation. She became chair of our foundation, and she did a very, very good job. And what we do is every year we have a family day in the museum, and we have a special tour by one of the curators, a visit behind the scenes, and that's very motivating by the most passionate people in the museum, of course, the curators. If there is an exhibition in the Netherlands, we go together to that exhibition to attend the opening. We once went with the whole family for a few days to Paris with the curator of the museum who showed where Vincent worked. I told about the studio of Cormont, where de Lautrec and Vincent worked together, where they lived, the two apartments where they lived, where my grandfather was born, and that works out very well. And we always conclude with drinks and a nice dinner. And so when we, for example, when we were in Paris at like 11, my generation thinks it's time to go to the hotel room. And the next generation says, we are in Paris, why don't we go out together? Enjoy. So they all know each other very well, and they're very much motivated. And I'm not someone for governing, becoming a member of a board. I like Vincent's art, and others, they like very much, and they look forward to becoming a board member one day.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing, and we're very honored that you accepted our invitation and stepped up to the challenge to joining us for this incredible conversation. So thank you so much, and like people in the audience said, we sure do hope that you can come back and visit us soon. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much, Maria. It was wonderful meeting you all, and thank you for the wonderful questions.
Muchas gracias a todos también.